Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Thrive in 5 podcast. I hope you are having a fab day so far, whether you're listening to this on your commute first thing in the morning, on your lunch break, on your way home from work, whatever time it is. I hope you're having a fabulous day so far. Now, this episode is going out on a Monday, and that might mean that if you're dieting, you've hopped on the scales and you have stressed out. You've been getting on them all of last week and they've been going down. You've been feeling good. And then you got on the scales this morning and it's like, oh my God, the world is ending. They have not gone down. In fact, they have just jumped up. It's a nightmare. It's a horrible feeling. And I remember it also all too well. And it's something that a lot of my clients struggle with. A lot of the days in the TFP, the scales are a big stressor. And it can be really, really demotivating when you get on the scales and they haven't gone down. It's horrible. And there's a good reason for this. You know, you are a professional woman. You're probably quite a data driven person. You're used to at work being driven by data. I talk to clients all the time about this, where they're like, yeah, but at work, like I measure my progress, based on like income that I've brought in or on deals or on, like hours I've built. Like those are the things that I measure progress on. So of course I measure progress in weight loss in terms of the number on the scales. Of course you do. That is okay. I'm not saying don't weigh yourself. Within the TFP, we always encourage our clients to jump on the scales every single day because it gives us a number to look at. It gives us data. We can then take an average. We can take a trend. That is a really good thing to do from a data perspective. But it can also be stressful when you get on the scales after a weekend and the scales have gone up. So today, I'm going to explain why you have absolutely no right to be stressed about the scales today and give you some insight into what might be happening if they have jumped up after a weekend, after a holiday, or maybe just randomly. Maybe the scales have just jumped up randomly and you're like, Amy, what the fuck is going on? Let me tell you. We're listening to this on a Monday. You spent the weekend enjoying yourself. Maybe you were still tracking your food. Maybe you were a bit more relaxed. And now the scales this morning have jumped up 2, 3, 4 pounds and you're panicking. In the TFP, we have a little system called the Scale Fluctuation Evaluator, which is a bit of a mouthful, but it's cool. It is a tool that we use to help us understand why the scales aren't moving. Because if the scales have jumped up 3 pounds, that is not body fat. Not unless over the weekend you ate an extra 10,000 calories above your maintenance calories. To gain a pound of body fat, you have to eat 3,500 calories. To lose a pound of body fat, you have to eat fewer. I can't even speak. You have to eat fewer 3,500 calories, less 3,500 calories, 3,500 calories less than your maintenance. Oh, that was a mouthful. So if you have gained 3 pounds on the scales overnight, you need to ask yourself, have I eaten an extra 10,000 calories above my maintenance calories, which for most people is somewhere between 2,000 and 2,500 calories a day? If you have, then good on you, because that is like 5 medium Domino's pizzas on top of a regular weekend of food, which if you've done that, honestly, I want to talk to you because that is incredible. And, that is a real achievement. If you've done that, fantastic. Most likely you haven't. So let's talk about the questions that we ask within the Scale Fluctuation Evaluator to understand what might have happened. So first of all, did you eat different types of food? If you've eaten more carbohydrates this weekend, that will mean that you retained water. The clue's kind of in the name carbohydrate. They need water in order to be broken down. So your body will retain water when you eat carbohydrates. It's the reason why no carbs before marbs works, because you just dump water weight when you stop eating carbohydrates. So if you've eaten more carbohydrates this weekend, you might be retaining water. If you've eaten higher salt foods, maybe you've eaten out, maybe you've had foods that are saltier, you will retain water because that's how sodium is sort of processed through the body. Also, if you've eaten higher fat foods, it might mean that digestion is slower, meaning there's more food in your gut, which means when you get on the scales, there's more stuff to have mass. Next up, did you eat at different times? If you ate later, you might have more food in your system. That can impact how your body digests. If you have, your meals spaced out differently, if during the working week you're having breakfast at 7, lunch at 12 and dinner at 7, but then at the weekend you're having maybe a brunch and then a later dinner, that can mean that your foods in your system are all different times, and that means the scales are going to show different numbers as well. Did you drink alcohol? When you drink alcohol, what tends to happen is your body dehydrates the day after. So let's say on Saturday night you drink alcohol. On Sunday morning, the scales might weigh less because you're dehydrated. But your body then hangs on to all of that water and a little bit more the following day. So on a Monday, the scales might jump up quite considerably because you are overhydrated as a result of having drunk alcohol. Did you move differently over the weekend? Often at the weekend for me, that's when particularly in my corporate life, but actually even now, that's when I will do more steps. I'll go for longer walks. I'm recording this on a Sunday and I've literally just come back from a really long walk, and that can mean that you maybe have a bit more inflammation. If you have a big workout at the weekend, you might be a bit inflamed. That can impact the number on the scales. Sleeping differently as well. If you're away from home, sleeping in a different bed, that can impact things. When you have disrupted sleep, that can impact the number on the scales. If you've drunk alcohol, that can disrupt your sleep, which can impact the number on the scales. Was your routine different? Every time our bodies have different routines, they will often retain water, and that can impact the number on the scales. Did you eat more food as well? Eating higher calories doesn't necessarily mean you'll gain weight. If you eat at a deficit during the week and then at maintenance or thereabouts during the weekend, energy balance still stands. You're still not, you're not eating in a surplus, meaning you're going to gain body fat. In addition, when you do eat more food, your body doesn't want to gain body fat. So it will often adjust energy requirements. It will, maybe your heart rate might go up, you might move a bit more, you might blink a bit more in order to manage some of those excess calories. But when you have a higher volume of food, when you do have a higher calorie day, you might notice the scales fluctuate more, because when you have different volumes of food, the more your weight will fluctuate. There's more carbohydrates in your food to mean that the scales fluctuate. When you have higher volumes of food, you have more variation. I always say to the team members when they're transitioning from a deficit towards maintenance to expect the scales to fluctuate more, because the more food you have, the more variability there is for those scales to fluctuate. And then finally, is there something going on from a health perspective that could be impacting the number on the scales? Where are you at in your menstrual cycle? If you are heading towards the back end of your menstrual cycle, towards your period, if you're the week or so before your period, sort of day 21 plus of your cycle, you might notice that the scales go up. That's really common. The average woman gains 3 to 5 pounds of water weight around her period. That can have an impact. Incidentally, you might also notice the scales jump up around ovulation. For me, this always happens middle of my cycle, because as your body shifts hormone profiles, we'll talk about this on a future episode, it can impact the number on the scales. So that could be having an impact. And also from a health perspective, are you poorly? It sounds gross, but snot has mass. If you've got a cold, you might notice the scales go up. So that's just some of the questions that we asked in the Scale Fluctuation Evaluator to help us understand why the scales might be fluctuating. Because, as I say, if it's a big jump up or down, it's not body fat. Your body doesn't gain body fat that quickly overnight. It also doesn't lose body fat that quickly overnight. And this is why taking those daily measurements is a much more powerful thing to do. Jump on the scales every single day, look at the average across a week, take that as your number, and then keep tracking that average over time. Do not panic today. If the scales are up, take a deep breath, crack on, do the things you need to do, and I'll catch you tomorrow.